Thank you all. Thanks to the Arab American Student Union and the Arab American Law Students and the National Lawyers Guild and JVP, and did I leave anybody else? Palestine, which one? Thank you for coming today. Let me ask you a preliminary question. How many of you are students here at Wayne State? Okay, you guys come forward. We don't need, there's no test. Don't worry, I'm not going to call on you. So come forward. It's like we're small enough. This was supposed to be a workshop, a discussion. We'll have some talk time, so come up. Those of you not students, you can stay where you are. I like you too, but you know, this is for the students. Let me just say that while you all are moving, I worked for the National Lawyers Guild for a very long time, including on the very first National Lawyers Guild trip to the occupied Palestinian territories back in the 70s, which created a huge new kind of discussion in the Lawyers Guild. So I'm very glad that the Guild has remained involved in this issue. Now let me ask you all a couple of other questions. How many of you are familiar with what Barbara already referred to, the BDS campaign? Not everybody. Okay, some people. How many of you have worked for a while on the issue of Israel-Palestine? Some, not everybody. That's good. So we have some new folks, we have some folks with a bit more experience, we have a range of folks. That's the best. Now, one last question, and then I'll say some stuff. So we saw how many people are students at the university here. How many of you are faculty or staff here? A few others. And the rest of you are from the community here? Is that more or less right? Let's see those hands. Okay. Oh, okay. So it's about half, well, I'd say 2/3 university, 1/3 community, something like that. Because a big part of the challenge in doing work on this issue is bringing those two things together. And it's sometimes really hard. I can't tell you the times I've gone to speak somewhere and I'll spend like the afternoon at a university and I'll hear from all these great activists that are doing this great work. We don't know what to do about the people in X city. There's nothing going on there. You know, we can't reach them. They're not doing anything. And then that night I'll go speak at some church or some mosque or whatever, something in the community, and everybody will be saying, God, we wish the students on that campus were doing something, but they're not doing anything. We don't know who to talk to. There's nobody doing nothing. And so, okay, what's wrong with this picture? You know, people aren't talking to each other. So obviously here, people are talking to each other because here you're both in the same room. Cherish that. That's really, really important. Because one of the things about student organizing is it's the most exciting and energetic community you'll ever work with. But everybody graduates in 4 years. Well, not everybody graduates, but most people graduate in 4 years and the rest leave. So it's not built-in stability like in a community. On the other hand, it's more energetic, more excited, more engaged. So it's, you know, you need both to have both staying power and the excitement. So I think that that's kind of organizing lesson number one, if you will, is keep talking to each other. Don't keep having things that are just for students and just for the community. You need stuff that's based on campus. Students for Justice in Palestine, Arab American law students. I mean, these are student-based organizations, and they're crucial. But make those links with the groups in the community. What that comes from, in my experience, is a sense that you need to start where people are, not where you want them to be. So what we're doing is all about education. We're learning lessons from the anti-apartheid movement against South Africa, of particularly the 1980s. And there's a ton of lessons to learn from that. One of the most important is that struggle, that movement, didn't start in the 80s when those of us in the US first started hearing about it and when there was really an active anti-apartheid movement. Now I'm looking around the room and I'm seeing a few people who probably remember that era. But for you students, do you have much, just tell me yes or no if you have much familiarity with the anti-apartheid movement of the 80s and 90s. Yes, no, yes? A few of you. Not everybody. It's not yet in the textbooks, I imagine. I don't know, unless you're taking classes on social movements, I don't know how much you'd necessarily learn about it. But there's a bunch of lessons to be learned there. one of the most important was that that struggle started back in the 30s and 40s. And it took decades before it became global and before there was really a result. And the lesson is, you know, it's a long struggle. It doesn't happen fast. So if we go back to this question of starting where people are, it means that we can't start by talking about BDS. People say, BDS, what does that mean? And then you say, boycott, divestment, and sanctions. Well, what does that mean? That's not where people start. People start, it seems to me, with, in most cases, their own lives. So in Detroit, what's the biggest issue that's facing people here with house foreclosures and lack of jobs, right? Jobs is a huge issue. There's no money. There's no money for jobs. There's no money for rebuilding homes. There's no money for education. How many of you students are struggling to make ends meet because your scholarship money has been cut? Okay, that's where people are. That's how you start. So on this issue, you're concerned about the issue of Israel-Palestine, its issues of justice, its issues of fairness, its issues of equality, its issues of human rights and international law. But the starting point is where people are. So here's a couple of good statistics for you. I've got 3 sets, and I'll tell you how to, you don't have to write it all down because I'll tell you how to get them in a minute. It's 2 clicks of your computer mouse. It's the easiest thing around. The cheat sheet is, it's a website called aidtoisrael.org. And once you're on it, you click on a state, you click on a city, a county, a congressional district, and it'll tell you, in these 10 years, this 10-year period, the U.S. is paying $30 billion in military aid to Israel, the 23rd wealthiest country in the world. 23rd wealthiest country, $30 billion of our tax money. Now, that's not chump change. That's a lot of money. So if you live in Detroit, how many of you live in Detroit, city of Detroit? Okay, for those of you, you've spent more than $85 million of Detroit tax money in military aid to Israel. Now, if that money was staying here at home, it would cover 1,417 people to get green job training for a new job, or more than 69,000 people getting a year's worth of health care. What do you think makes you safer? How many of you live in Dearborn? Okay, for Dearborn, $16 million over those 10 years. If that money stayed at home, 271 people could get green job training every year. 482 children every year could get special reading courses for young children. And 13,000 people could get health care. Southfield. Who's from Southfield? Nobody? 1. Okay, you get your own. Southfield, $14 million in military aid to Israel. 174 affordable housing units could be built every year out of that money. Or 11,600 people could get health care. What makes us safer? Is this a good use of our tax money? This is part of the answer to why we don't have money for jobs, why we don't have money for schools. Because our money is going to illegal wars that our military is fighting, and to support illegal actions by Israel, violations of international law, violations of human rights, violations of UN resolutions. So that's our starting point, is the outrage. How dare they? How dare they use our money and our name to support these atrocities? And then it all comes home when we start there.